think this, no, it's on, okay. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
So not only did Louis grow up with my father, but my babysitter is here in the audience, Pam Gottheld, who works here at the library. So it truly is a small world. So I'm going to be talking with you. I like the way that Louis kind of framed this presentation. It's really about hopes and dreams for making our community, our collective community, better. And I guess I'll start. We have I have colleagues that work for many other municipalities in central New York, including the city of Syracuse and other places. And amongst us, we have it's kind of a running joke, but it's not. We don't think it's very funny. Okay, it's a slogan that we made up for Syracuse, and it's not a good slogan. It's not something that we're proud of, but it's something that we're trying to change by working together. So the slogan is Syracuse. It's less than you want and more than you deserve. Okay. And my colleagues and I have felt frustrated by that mentality that I think has kind of permeated this community. And it's something that's changing and that we have to keep working at to continue to change and move the community forward, right? As a young person getting started in my career of planning in this community, oftentimes I was told, that we want to be a more creative place, and then you would bring a creative idea and they would say, well, we can't do that. So that's kind of where that slogan came from. So it's really something we use to remind ourselves about maybe where we were, and also to set up an aspiration for being something more than that. Okay. So this project, Elevating Erie, has been a collaboration between the Town of Dewitt, the city of Syracuse, and it's been supported by New York State Department of State through two different programs, one which is called the Local Waterfront Revitalization Program, and another which is called the Brownfield Opportunity Area Program. One of the grants, the Local Waterfront Grant, is a grant that the Town of Dewitt has, and the Brownfield Opportunity Area Grant is a grant that the city of Syracuse had. I have been with the Town of DeWitt for just over 3 years, and in my first year I wrote this grant. I was actually sitting in a presentation from New York State Department of State about this local waterfront program, and I said, what if I had a corridor that used to have water in it? Could we participate in the program? Well, it turns out that there are segments of the Town of DeWitt that still do have the historic waters of the Erie Canal. And there are other parts of DeWitt that is just the historical corridor with no water. And there was a lot of back and forth between me and Department of State, and ultimately they said, yeah, we think you're eligible. So I applied for a grant for a local waterfront program for a corridor that doesn't have any water in it. And that's, that takes that kind of creativity, I think, to kind of make things happen. So since then, we've received support from the Erie Canal Museum, from the Central New York Community Foundation, from the New York State Canal Corporation, and many others as we started this project. So I'm sure that you're all familiar with the history of the Erie Canal, which is probably one of the most important, if not the most important, public infrastructure investments in human history. Right? Really opened up the interior of the country at the time, and it really made New York City one of the premier cities in the world because it had access to all these natural resources in the West. The West meaning places like Syracuse, right? At the time. So we know that the canal spanned the upstate New York cities of Albany, Buffalo, and Rochester and Syracuse, and really connected the Great Lakes system to the Hudson River to New York City. The corridor has now been designated as a National Heritage Corridor. Actually, portions of the barge canal system were just designated as a National Historic Landmark, which is a major accomplishment for New York State, and very exciting. And for many decades, the state has been working on a project called the Erie Canalway Trail. This is a trail that will follow some of the historical route of the canal, parts of the New York State barge canal system, and parts of our historic railroad system, and will ultimately span Buffalo to Albany, which is about 360 plus miles. And when that's finished, it will be the longest continuous bike and pedestrian trail in North America, which is, I think, a pretty big deal. And actually this year begins the bicentennial celebration of the canal. So it's kind of the stars are aligned, so to speak, to really make something happen along this historic corridor, which for many, many, many decades has been forgotten, especially when we talk about Erie Boulevard, which is I'll get to in a moment. So when the Erie Canal was complete in 1825, it had cost less than $7 million to build, and created thousands of jobs at that time. And about 2 centuries later, the canal still plays a significant role in the upstate economy. And if you've been following the beer tanks that have been floating up the barge canal system from originating in China, making their way to Rochester, you know that barge canal still serves an economic purpose. And not only is it used for that kind of economic purpose, but it's a major recreational waterway for the state. And it's estimated that the Erie Canalway Trail, which again runs between Albany and Buffalo, brings an annual traffic volume of almost 1.6 million visits per year, which is a lot of people. And including kind of the economic analysis of those visits, Erie Canal Trail visitor spending generates approximately $253 million in sales, is responsible for 3,440 jobs, and $78 million in labor income, and brings almost $30 million in taxes to the upstate economy each year. And bicycling is a rapidly growing, continues to be a rapidly growing form of outdoor recreation, not just in the US, but across the globe. In the US, it's been determined that more of us Americans bicycle than golf, ski, and play tennis combined. So it's, we might not think of it as such, but it's a major economic force. Okay, so we have this system that the state has been constructing. As I said, it will become the longest continuous bike and pedestrian trail in North America. There are multiple gaps in the system, and that's partly what this project has been about. So there's a 14-mile gap in central New York between DeWitt, where the old Erie Canal State Historic Park ends, and Camillus, which is where the canal trail picks up again. So that's really, in part, what this project has been about, is how we close the gap in central New York. And we've gotten a lot of questions about what do we mean by elevating. And I think people are tuned in to what's going on with Interstate 81. We're not planning to build a bridge between Camillus and DeWitt, but rather it's a metaphor, right, for how we take this historic resource and elevate it in our collective minds and celebrate it as a cherished asset. Certainly, Syracuse, the city of Syracuse would not be here if it weren't for the Erie Canal, right? It was a way to get salt from here to New York City, and relatively inexpensively so that people could make money in the process. And that's really what helped Syracuse to grow. So it's an important part of our history. Okay, so the part of the reason why we're focused on this gap, not just because I work for the town of DeWitt, but because the riders who make their way across the state hate, literally hate, to come through the Syracuse area, right? It's the midway point. There's no direct route. There's no, there aren't bike lanes. There's very little infrastructure to get someone from Camillus to DeWitt. And I can tell you, actually, last summer, actually, when did they pave the canal path in DeWitt? Was that last summer? Yeah, okay. So last summer, I was heading out to a meeting, and I saw these two cyclists, a man and a woman. They were coming from the west, so they had come from, I learned, they had come from Buffalo, and they were making their way to Albany. They had just made it all the way through Syracuse, and they were, I think their marriage was about to end, actually. So, they were very unhappy with one another, and I just so happened that this angel came along and was able to tell them where to go. But the problem was that the canal path then was closed because they were paving it. So I had to explain to them how to get beyond Manlius Center Road, because that whole segment of the trail was. So, but the point is that it's a miserable experience, and even a marriage-ending experience, right? So it's something that we really need to work on as a community to support those riders, make them feel welcome to our community, so that they maybe want to tell their friends about what a great experience it was, and hopefully they'll come too. All right, so we haven't been working in a vacuum. There is a group in central New York called the Syracuse Metropolitan Transportation Council. Have any of you heard of them? Yeah. Okay, you are in fact informed. So they are the transportation planning agency for essentially Onondaga County. They do go a little into Oswego and a little into Madison County. But they've been working on a project to figure out, what routes could we take to get from Camillus over here to DeWitt. And there were lots of different routes that had been looked at. But I can tell you now that most likely the trail is going to come through a portion of Honeywell International's property. And if you paid attention to the news in the past couple of weeks, there was an environmental damages fund that was mandated by the state for Honeywell to not just do the lake cleanup, but to do cleanup around the lake as well. A portion of that money is going to be used to complete a segment of the Canalway Trail. Then that trail will go past the New York State Fairgrounds on Bridge Street in Solvay. And the county, Onondaga County, is working on a project to widen the sidewalk on Bridge Street to make it able to accommodate cyclists. And then it'll use the pedestrian bridges that go across State Fair Boulevard and 690, and will connect you up to the Loop the Lake Trail. Onondaga Lake was part of the New York State Barge Canal system, so we're celebrating that portion of our heritage. The trail will then come down the southwest shore of the lake, and which is part of the Honeywell cleanup project. And Onondaga County is going to be building a bridge that goes from that over the CSX rail yards and onto what's known as the Roth Steel property, which is a property that was taken by eminent domain by the Industrial Development Organization for Onondaga County. And then it'll follow to Hiawatha Boulevard and connect to the Onondaga Creek Walk and come into downtown Syracuse. And then it will follow Water Street out to the east, which is where our project comes in. We've been focused on this segment from South Beach Street going all the way back to the Erie Canal, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. So there were a variety of different, there were a couple of different routes that were explored. One was actually using Erie Boulevard. Another was using the area between 690 and Erie Boulevard. We have a particular bias about the route in the town. Our feeling is if we're gonna spend money, we would like to spend it in our front yard. So we have all these businesses that have invested millions of dollars on either side of Erie Boulevard, and it makes sense to us to support that investment with an investment in the roadway, which is sorely lacking.
Is it a roadway or a bikeway?
Well, I'll get to that. But Erie Boulevard right now is a roadway. We like to say 8 lanes of fury. But, right. So that's what we've been doing, and this is actually, here's the 8 lanes of fury. This is Erie Boulevard today.
It's ugly.
It's ugly, yes. Very, very ugly, as a matter of fact.
You'd never think it was a barn at one time canal.
You would never think about that, no. So that's what we wanted to get people to realize. And actually, growing up here, I remember when I was probably a teenager, I was riding with my parents in the car on Erie Boulevard, and I said to them, how did Erie Boulevard get its name? And they said, well, it used to be the Erie Canal. But other than the name, there's nothing to tell you what an important role, that corridor played in our history. Nothing at all. It's been completely erased. So our idea was to let's raise that up out of the ground. Let's do something to reconnect to that history and heritage. So we started that process with hosting an international ideas competition. And we said we wanted to think about this as, we were calling it a biodiverse boulevard, which basically means that Erie Boulevard should be more than just for cars. It could in fact be for animals or humans who are walking or biking. And if you pay attention to Erie Boulevard, along the north and west sides, there are residential neighborhoods in the town of Dewitt and the city of Syracuse. And they've been pretty much cut off from the boulevard. And we think that there's an opportunity to reconnect them. So that's part of this idea of biodiversity. So we issued a call back in the fall of 2015 for designers around the globe to participate. And we sent this beautiful poster to design schools all across North America. We also did some advertising online through clearinghouses that designers kind of pay attention to on the web to see what design competitions are coming up so that they can participate. And we set a framework. We said, all right, we would like you to submit to us ideas about how we could turn Erie Boulevard into a healthy urban corridor as opposed to an auto-centric corridor that's basically just for cars, and we go there and we pull into a parking lot and we go into a building and then we go home, right? We want to change that kind of mindset. We wanted to think about how we could enhance biodiversity and create habitat along the historical corridor. We want to establish new recreation opportunities along the corridor. We want the corridor to help to promote economic growth in the region. And we want to do something we call developing multimodal connectivity. That's kind of planner nerd speak for a corridor that has more opportunities than just driving, but also walking, biking, transit opportunities, so that people have more than one option. Okay. So we issued that call, and then we kind of had to sit back and wait for a couple of months for submissions to come in. In the end, we had nearly 70 entries from 16 different countries around the globe. And we were pretty excited. We had hoped that the competition would help to kind of raise people's awareness of what could happen along this corridor, and to get ideas that were way outside the box, some ideas that'll never happen ever, and some ideas that maybe could happen. So we did. We got lots of different ideas, and we organized a jury of lots of folks that represented many different areas, including local elected officials, national design experts, biologists, local business owners, and others, to kind of help us to look through all the ideas that had come in and sort of rank them. And the ideas that we solicited were in a few different categories. So one category was the whole corridor. And to orient you, so downtown Syracuse is over here, and this is Erie Boulevard East, coming up to Bridge Street, okay? And then this is Towpath Road, which is a town road, but Towpath Road is the historical route of the canal. And then connecting over to the Old Erie Canal State Historic Park. Okay? So one category was the boulevard. Right? Another category we called the branch site. This is where Erie Boulevard and Towpath Road and Bridge Street kind of come together. And if you could see this here, this is a pond. And that pond is a remnant of the Erie Canal that most people don't even know is there, much less that it's a remnant of the Erie Canal. And then there was a site in the city of Syracuse that was one of the grassy median blocks within the city, and another site, and this was called the Block. Very creative names. And then this site is called, what do you think?
The bridge.
The bridge. All right. This is where Kinney Road goes over 481. Okay. So we asked for the participants to give us ideas that looked at these various different areas along the corridor. And we had the jury review all the ideas that came in, and they selected winners. Okay? Now, the winners that were selected, it doesn't mean that we're going to build exactly what was selected. It just means that these were some of the most compelling ideas that were presented. So this is was the winning entry for the boulevard. And I should say that we do have a website, which is elevatingerie.com. And all of this stuff is on the website. So if you want to go look more, you can do that at your leisure. Okay? So if you look at this, there are ideas for how to incorporate transit. This is I don't know if it's a bus or light rail. Ways of activating the median in the middle with recreation and kind of new plants and other things. And actually, this is kind of the best example. Here's bike lanes on the side, bike lane here, and all kinds of kind of fun stuff going on in the middle. This group, designers have a very funny sense of naming, but they're called B Percentage. Okay. The next site was the Block site, and you might recognize the quality of this drawing. It's the same team that won the Boulevard site, also B Percentage. And they further kind of articulated what that central median space might look and feel like. A gathering space with some kind of water element harkening back to the canal. Took me a long time to figure this out. These are ping pong tables. So some of the team members are from Asian countries where ping pong is huge, right? So of course we had to have ping pong tables. This is the branch site, and this team's name is the same as the proposal, Erie Not Park, they called it. this is a floating museum on top of that remnant of the Erie Canal. Now I said there are some things that might happen and some things that will never happen. This will probably never happen, but the idea of creating a central gathering space in the town where people from different neighborhoods and for that matter from across the state, country, and world might go and learn something about the canal, that is a compelling idea and something that we're going to pursue. And then there was the bridge site. And this proposal was from a team called Object Territories. And so we were asking for proposals for how to get over this, right? To get from here to this is Towpath Road. And what they said was, what if we go under? So we've been calling this the anti-bridge. But you could actually, there is a way to connect underneath 481 and reconnect the water that's along Towpath Road to water that's on this side of 481. So we're looking at that. Okay, so as I said, all this stuff is on the website. We did have an exhibition. Did any of you go to the exhibition that was at the Erie Canal Museum? No. Are you familiar with the World Canals Conference is going to be here in Syracuse in September? Yeah, it's a big deal. They travel to different cities around the world every year. This year they're going to be here. And as part of that, the exhibition for Elevating Erie is going to be at the Old Harbor Freight Building, historic Harbor Freight Building at the Inner Harbor. Okay, so you'll be able to check it out there. So we had the exhibition opening. All of the submissions from the competition were able to be viewed as part of the exhibition. And we also launched simultaneously, this was in May of 2016, an online survey. And we asked the public to participate in this survey online. And they had an opportunity to review the submissions, and we asked them some pointed questions about what would make this corridor better. Okay? And we did some other fun things. We had billboards along Erie Boulevard. We didn't have any in the town because we don't allow them, so we had to put them in the city. All right. We got lots of local media coverage. We went out to different locations in the county and asked people to participate in the survey. This one was at the farmer's market, and we had a table there. We had computers set up so people could sit down and participate. This is actually one of the busiest survey days of all the days that we had. People were generally kind of excited to see that they could do something different while they were at the farmer's market. We spoke all over the place like I'm doing today. We have a website, which I've already talked about. All right, so we had this survey, and my notes. We had there's over 3,500 visits to the survey. Yeah, over 3,500 visitors from 38 states and 50 countries. And we received over 1,200 completed entries. Okay? So I've been working as a planner in Central New York for almost 20 years. And I can tell you that we never get that much participation. Even in the I-81 project, they haven't had that much participation. So it was a big accomplishment. So what did we learn? People told us a variety of things. One, they would like to see a more attractive streetscape. That's not. So this is about. I started off saying less than you want, more than you deserve. So let's get something that's more than we want and more than we deserve. How about a nice looking street? People said they'd like to see more green infrastructure, which is something that they've been doing as part of the Save the Rain program in the county and the city, and more trees. Right? It's pretty simple stuff from my perspective. We'd like to see protected bike lanes. If you want bicyclists on Erie Boulevard, I have biked it. And actually I should say, people do bike it every day. If you go out there, it's not tons and tons of people, but there are people out there walking and bicycling every day. And it's not safe at all.
What does the 40% mean? 40% what?
So 40% of the people that participated in the survey said they would like protected bike lanes. We asked them a whole bunch of questions about what they would like to see, and that was one of the ones that came up the most. Yeah, thank you for asking. So the same goes for here. So 55% of people said
They would like to see that.
yeah. 35, over a third of participants said they would like to see mixed use. So that means like the building coming in from 92 in the village where you have the Kinney Pharmacy on the first floor and apartments above, that's mixed use. Okay? So people said they'd like to see mixed use along this corridor. New trail systems along the corridor. Improved access to historic features. Right? So as I was saying, when I was a kid, I was saying, why is this called Erie Boulevard? Well, there's nothing there to tell its story. People said they would like to see improvements to the bus system along the corridor. There are multiple bus routes that go up and along the Erie Boulevard, and if you've ever noticed, when people are waiting for the bus, generally they're standing in a mud puddle, which is not right, and it's something that we need to change. So it's something that we're looking at. Okay. So then we had people rank, we sort of handpicked the ideas that we, and I say we, when I say we, I mean the city and the town, ideas that we really liked that came in through the competition. So we had people rank the images of those different ideas. And one of the top images was this one, a median Greenway. So this, if you think about this as the middle of Erie Boulevard, some sort of activated space with a trail system and places for crossing at the intersections and nice plantings and other things. So this is an idea people found very compelling. So we started with this competition and we don't want to stop there. So we've been kind of thinking about how do we carry these ideas forward. So the town hired a firm called Alta Planning and Design. They're one of the top bike and pedestrian, they call themselves active transportation planning firms in the country. And this is actually a man named Jeff Olson, who was one of our jurors for the competition, and he's also one of the principals of Alta Planning and Design. And there he is, biking in the middle of Erie Boulevard. Not a place that you might want to spend a lot of time. And we asked them to kind of take a technical look at what could happen along Erie Boulevard. Could we reduce the number of travel lanes, for example? So we did what's called a level of service analysis, which is a very technical term. It basically means how many cars are traveling up and down the boulevard at different times of day, how long do people wait at lights, and if we made changes to that, what would it do to travel times along the boulevard? And what this shows is, so right now there's 6 lanes, 3 lanes in either direction, with lots of turning lanes. What this shows is reducing that to 2 lanes in either direction. And based on the analysis that we've done, there would be no appreciable change to a driver along Erie Boulevard if you removed a lane in either direction. At existing lights, the queuing lanes would get a little bit longer, but there's still room in the queue and the light for all the cars to still make it through. Okay? Now, the reason for that is because Erie Boulevard was designed and built before 690 existed. Okay? And so it has a lot more capacity than it will ever need. Okay? So this shows a trail. You remember the median Greenway is what people liked, right? So we asked Alta to help us to think about how you could do this safely in the center of Erie Boulevard. We're not changing the width of that center median at all. We're just greening it up, adding trees and some lights, and reducing the number of travel lanes. So again, it's a feasibility analysis that we've done at the town. We've shared this with the state, and I'll talk a little bit more about where that's at. So this is the existing road. We call this plan view, looking down. So this is the asphalt median in the middle, which is less than we want, more than we deserve. I don't think any road should have an asphalt median, but that's just me. Maybe you feel differently. All right, and then we have the lanes in either direction, and this is what it could look like. Okay, 2 lanes with a nice wide shoulder, cycle track, what we call a cycle track in the middle, which means bike lanes in either direction, with a stone dust path. Actually, I think it's going to end up just being on one side, and sidewalks on the side. So I think this would probably be a more attractive streetscape. What do you think?
Yeah.
Perhaps. Okay. So we're also doing some other things. So we are working on updating the town's zoning to allow for mixed-use development, which is something we heard from people. DeWitt doesn't really have a center in a traditional sense. So it doesn't have the village of Manlius, right? Well, we do have the village of East Syracuse, but that's another discussion. So if DeWitt did have a center, it would probably be along Erie Boulevard, maybe somewhere about where Shopping Town Mall is. Okay? So what we're looking to do is promote the redevelopment of properties over the long term into mixed use, kind of walkable, more urban, almost you could say village-like setting. Okay? And that's something we are working with the town planning board and the town board, and it's probably something that'll be adopted before the end of June or maybe into July. So this is happening pretty quickly, and we're pretty excited about it. And then one of the other ideas that people really liked was the idea of revealing the canal in some way. There were proposals to actually reopen, at least not the canal in a navigable sense necessarily, but at least some sort of reference to the canal along the Erie Boulevard corridor. I'm not sure that we're going to get there. That would be an awfully expensive project, and I don't know the value of that necessarily. But another of the ideas that people liked was the idea of creating a park at the Whitewaters Pond, which I referenced before. And here's some ideas for what you might do there. Maybe we could skate there, and I've actually heard from people who did skate there when they were kids. Maybe some of you did, right? Or in the summertime, maybe there's something kind of similar to the Swan Pond here in the village of Manlius. Probably quite a bit bigger than the Swan Pond, but you can get an idea. So here's just some larger images of what's going on there. So there's the pond. This is Best Buy. Is it Petco? I think it's up here, and soon to be Alta Beauty and Bed Bath & Beyond and all those places. And then on the other side of Towpath Road, there's the old, people know it as Uncle Sam's. Right? I knew it as the Country Club. That's now been demolished. And we're hoping to see this whole area redeveloped as a new kind of mixed-use neighborhood. So this process is going to start sometime in August or September of this year. I have another grant through the local waterfront program We're going to be hiring a firm to develop a master plan for this whole area. And we're also going to be doing another kind of public engagement program around the pond itself. And we're going to have a separate team that all they do is design and public participation. So we're hoping to get, maybe we can get 1,200 more people to participate in that.
Have they given any thought to making that more accessible to canoes?
We are thinking about that. There are some challenges to doing that here, although it certainly could, you could put a little rowboat there.
I've canoed it, but it's the hard part's getting the canoe in and out.
But you've canoed it at the old Erie Canal State Historic Park, probably, not this little pond, I would imagine.
Actually, well, I've been in one of the ponds there, I'm not sure. I got
Okay, well, yes, we are thinking about that. I'm open to that. We're looking at the potential of kind of re-watering the whole side of Towpath Road along the historical route of the canal. That's doable. So you have a question?
When was the canal filled in to create Erie Boulevard, and how did they divert the water? What did they do with the water?
It was in the early 1900s. There may be people here in the audience that know better than I, but sometime in the early 1900s. And the second question, I don't know where all of the water went. But I do know that the water from this pond goes along Towpath Road, and then there's a spot where it actually goes underneath 481, and it comes out just by the driveway to DeWitt Town Hall, and it flows into Butternut Creek. But the rest, the one thing I do know is that what was the historical canal bed has a giant sanitary sewer in the middle of it. So, yep.
When they filled in the canal in the city, how did they get the traffic to bypass Syracuse?
Wet
When they filled in the canal,
originally?
then there would have been
Boat
a
traffic,
gap
you
in the
Yeah.
canal traffic. How
Well,
did they get it to go around the
the
city?
state built the New York State Barge Canal System.
Oh, okay.
Which goes through the Mohawk River to Oneida Lake, to the Seneca River, and then to Point.
Okay.
It basically went north of Syracuse at that point, but it also can connect into Onondaga Lake and access the Inner Harbor. Okay. I just have a couple more things. I know, I think we end at 11:30, so you're welcome to ask questions, but I want to show you a couple more things if you're okay with that. So there are other things, the bridge site. People really like this idea of an eco bridge. These are eco bridges are something that have been built around the country. They're usually used where an interstate is near a national park. And the idea is it's a wildlife bridge to connect wildlife from one side to the other. But there are examples of where this kind of thing has been done in urban situations. This is actually in Redmond, Washington, which is where Microsoft has their headquarters. And this is a bridge over an interstate, and they have plants and stuff growing off the side of the bridge. So I show you that this has been done, and we're talking with the state about the possibility of doing something like that with the Kinney Road Bridge. And then I'll talk to you kind of where we are from a financial perspective. So we have, at this point, about $300,000 for capital improvements to the Whitewaters Pond, which sounds like a lot of money. It's not a lot of money, but it's enough to get us started and do some interventions there, maybe provide access to the water, some sort of viewing platform, and start to carve the trail in. We have another $500,000 project through Department of State to do the master planning, which I talked to you about already. We had submitted a grant which didn't get funded for making improvements to Towpath Road. And we're also looking at federal resources for transportation improvement projects. And the biggest of those is something called Tiger. We're not quite sure what's going to happen with Tiger at the federal level. That's also a whole other discussion. So, but the most exciting thing is the governor made an announcement back in January as part of his traveling State of the State addresses of a proposal for a $200 million commitment to completing the Erie Canalway Trail and completing the Hudson River Greenway Trail, which would connect New York City to Montreal and then Albany to Buffalo. That would be 760 plus miles, which would, if 360 plus is the longest continuous bike and pedestrian trail in North America, this is much more than that, right? Very exciting announcement, and that was a budget proposal, and the legislature approved that proposal this year. So this money is on the table. It's a three to 4 year commitment on the part of the state. And there are actually we've been meeting with DOT to look at the design of Erie Boulevard, which is, I would say, from 2015 when nobody was talking about this to 2017, and now we have probably an 18 to $30 million project to make improvements to Erie Boulevard, where there's going to be a trail in the median, and the state's going to be making some improvements to that roadway. So it was very exciting. And I showed you at the very beginning all of the different connections that have to happen to get from Camillus to the old Erie Canal State Historic Park in DeWitt. And all of those things have money behind them. So we're not just blowing smoke, but this is a real project that in the next 3 to 4 years, we're going to have a continuous trail connection through Onondaga County, which is pretty exciting. Couple last things. So we set out at the beginning to think big, and our feeling was that a lot of people in the community were saying with the I-81 project, don't build Erie Boulevard downtown because it's ugly. We don't want to see a boulevard, right? This is our experience collectively as a community. It's an ugly place, and we all recognize that. So we had to think big to get people thinking beyond the current kind of status. So we felt like we needed a defibrillator to kind of shock people into thinking differently about the corridor. And we feel we can't stop because this is what we're dealing with today.
You get rid of all those poles?
We'll see about that, Louis. We'll see about that. Have any of you been to the High Line in New York? The High Line is one of the coolest public infrastructure projects in the country.
Very exciting.
What's that?
I said, I understand New Yorkers love it.
Yes, it's a cool place. It was an elevated railroad platform that the city was thinking about tearing down. And they started with an ideas competition. And people said, what if we build a park up there? And today there's a park up there. So this is how the process works. Okay. There are other examples like this in New York State. I don't know if any of you.
Bridge outside of Poughkeepsie.
Yeah, this is called the walkway over the Hudson. It was an elevated rail connection across the Hudson River. It is now the tallest bike and pedestrian bridge in the world. And it connects Poughkeepsie to the other side of the Hudson. And I don't know how many miles of rail trails there are, but there are maybe 100 miles or so connecting on either side of the Hudson. Very, very cool place. And this was made into a state park. Right? They started this with an ideas competition. People were saying, let's tear that ugly bridge down. Other people said, no, I want to be able to get out there and see the boats going underneath. And it's become a major tourist destination along the Hudson River. And there's lots of other cool examples of what people are doing to design bike infrastructure. This is a floating bike track in Chicago. It's along the Chicago River, but I don't know where exactly. And this is actually something in Brisbane, Australia. One of my staff visited there, and she said, maybe we could do something like this. So this is just a sculptural element. I don't know what it signifies, but it has some meaning to people in Brisbane. And they have this flowering vine that is planted on it. And we have another project we're calling Spanning the Gap. We're working with a group out of New York City called City Lore. They do a lot of work around gathering oral histories. So that there'll be announcements about that in the news in the next few weeks. We're going to be inviting people to share their stories about the canal, whether they're historical stories or stories of using the canal today. And then what we're going to be doing is designing something like this, working with local artists to come up with some markers that capture those stories and kind of place them along the canal path. So I know I spoke a lot, and I haven't left a whole lot of time for questions, but the whole idea is to get us thinking about the future. Yeah.
So you've been very optimistic in this presentation, and it was a great presentation. But do you think that this project, are you an optimist? You sound like an optimist. Do you think this is the type of project that can overcome the typical impediments that exist against getting anything that benefits the community at large done unopposed, or at least without obstructing opposition by individual stakeholders who can throw impediments into projects? In other words, can this be lifted outside the political realm so that there's sufficient consensus to actually get this accomplished?
Yeah.
So many other things kind of fall by the wayside because you can't get that type of consensus. And the only other thing was, one of the problems with the boulevard now is that the intersecting major intersecting streets, Teal, Midler, Thompson, Bridge, and others, throw so much traffic off of onto the boulevard that the complicated traffic light systems that regulate the traffic, it takes forever, basically, to get in a high traffic time to actually get through those intersections, which slows down the traffic along the boulevard and would also slow down the biking and other traffic that traverse the boulevard in any kind of new scheme.
Well, first of all, yes, I am an optimist. I admit. But I'm optimistic because there is, as I said before, real money on the table, right? So oftentimes things don't happen because there's no money to do them. But in this case, we do have money to do them, and various different partners or stakeholders across from Camillus to DeWitt, including Onondaga County, Honeywell International, the city of Syracuse, the town, the state of New York through the Canal Corporation and Department of State, and the New York State Department of Transportation. We're all working together. We're on every couple of weeks. We're on a conference call together. The state actually hired the same firm that we're working with, Alta Planning and Design, to develop the plans for Erie Boulevard in particular. It's not going to be everything that we want to see at this point in time because it's a long stretch. It's 4.5 miles, and just to pave a bike path in the middle is, and to do some restriping of Erie Boulevard is a $20 million project. But we do have the money, so yes, I'm an optimist, but there's money on the table, and it's been approved by the legislature, and there's money coming from Honeywell to make all those connections. Just one other thing. So managing traffic on Erie Boulevard is a critical issue. That is New York State's road, and they're not going to allow any changes to that corridor that are going to make us all angry with them. So they are looking at signal timing, making sure that there's going to be capacity along the boulevard to accommodate. I could say this with a high degree of confidence. It won't get better, but it shouldn't get any worse.
Is there a foundation for the Erie Canal where people could give in $10, $15 and
support the effort.
That's-
Non-for-profit.
Yeah, so there is the National Heritage Corridor, the Erie Canalway National Heritage Corridor, and they do have a foundation associated with that entity.
Okay.
And I'm just thinking off the top of my head. If, for example, you wanted to, or somebody wanted to give money to the cause,
Sure.
you could work with them and, earmark it for a particular location or a particular thing.
Is it specific to Erie Canal?
The Erie Canalway National Heritage Corridor includes the historical route of the canal and the New York State Barge Canal system.
Okay.
Yep.
So it is local?
It covers the whole state, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Good. Fine.
Have
Yes,
you
sir.
reached out to the owners of Shopping Town, which, to try to
Yeah.
use that new, what is great facility, underutilized
Yeah.
facility?
Yeah. Yes, we have.
Every day.
The redevelopment of Shopping Town Mall is is critically important to the town. I don't know that the current owners are ever gonna get there, but that's as much as I could say at the moment. All I can say is, every time someone leaves the mall, it makes me more and more excited. I know people are depressed about it, but the less income the current owners have, the more likely they are to move on. So that's what I'm hopeful to see. Yeah.
I'm a supporter and I think it'd be wonderful. My concern is, for the last 3 years, I've been complaining about Erie Boulevard, why they can't at least get rid of the weeds. And they say there's no money.
Yeah.
Well, if we have all these trees, which would be wonderful,
Mhm.
is there money for upkeep?
Yeah, so that's a good question and an important question.
Yeah.
We are pursuing a couple of different ways of addressing that concern, which is a legitimate concern.
Yeah,
And you're not the only
what's
person that's
okay.
complaining. The town has said to the state that if they would provide us with a work permit, we would go out there and take the weeds down. So if you can be our ambassadors and reach out to state DOT and let them know that they should let the town in there to clean it up. That's one thing. And if there's grass in there and trees, we'd be happy to get in there and maintain them as well, as part of the town's responsibilities. But the state would need to give us permission. But it's that important to us, okay? The second thing is, we have been, this is another kind of separate effort. We have been talking with some of the local business and property owners about creating what's called a business improvement district, which is would be a special assessment district that property owners would pay into, and the money from that could be used to help to maintain the infrastructure. Obviously, we're not going to move forward with that unless the business owners see value in it. But to business and property owners that we have talked to have said that they're at least open to the idea. Obviously, they need to know how much is it going to cost me and what am I going to get for that. But that's, we are looking, that's a critically important concern.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
if they don't keep it up, it's not gonna.
Yeah.
Is there any way of rebuilding so that you never get potholes?
How much does a can around it cost?
I bet Erie Boulevard has more potholes.
Yeah.
Especially when we go out there and pull.
So we have been pushing the state to consider repaving the boulevard, but it's a long road. It's like I think it's 6 or 8 miles from the edge of downtown Syracuse to East Genesee Street. And it's a big paving project. The state has had that project on what's called the Transportation Improvement Program multiple times, and it was pulled off because there are competing resources, which goes to your concern about where's the money coming from. But they are working on getting it back on the tip so that the whole corridor can be repaved. Yeah.
Has much been thought been given to foot traffic going across it? I've seen people walking across.
Yes.
lanes or-
Yeah,
or
so
killed.
there are 3 or 4 different studies that are going on that are focused specifically on Erie Boulevard. So there's Elevating Erie. There was the map that I showed you earlier, looking at different trail routes. There's also a pedestrian safety study that's being done by the SMTC, and the state is at the table for that, and we're looking at improving, well, it's not just improving, in some places making facilities for pedestrians.
There's nothing there.
Yeah, in the town especially, there are few, there's one crosswalk at Grenfell by Shopping Town Mall. That's the only, and it has a crossing signal. That's the only one in the town of Dewitt. In the city of Syracuse, there's a lot more. But we've been pushing the state to, yes, we need that stuff today. Yeah. I know it's after 11:30, so I wouldn't be offended if anybody left, but I'm happy to take more questions.
So I just was wondering if the benches play any part in any of these trailways, or, I mean, they look for, it's for biking and
Yeah.
walking and, you know.
Yes.
For those of us who like to take a walk and sit down.
Yes. Yeah.
Um,
Yes, we'll have benches. I mean, we probably won't have benches right on Erie Boulevard, but like the Whitewaters Pond, for example, yes, that will be a gathering space with things like benches and, walking paths and not just cycling paths. So yes, yep.
I know there's pie in the sky, but are they talking about any bridges that would govern maybe Midler or Teal or anything?
Yeah, so bridges are incredibly expensive.
Right.
But there has been some conversation about the potential of building a bridge over Thompson Road. Thompson is the so the gentleman in the back was talking about how busy the cross streets are. From Bridge Street to the town line, there are only 3 crossings. One is Bridge Street. One is between Empire Plaza and, I hate the name, but the DeWitt Town Center, which is where Country Max is and Five Guys. So there's a crossing there, and then there's a crossing at Thompson Road. Thompson is the busiest of all those intersections. Bridge is a close second, but, so we have talked about the possibility of building. Lemoyne likes that idea, because it would help to create kind of a gateway experience up to their campus.
Have them
But,
fund it.
yeah.
Are you talking about pedestrian bridges or traffic bridges?
Would be a bike and pedestrian bridge, yeah. But, that's probably a $2 million, $3 million project. So it might be worth looking into, but it's not gonna happen right away. Yep.
Would you put covenants on the businesses and buildings being built, new buildings being built along Erie Boulevard to maintain a look, and say that people will have to landscape and make them attractive and maintain that?
Yeah, so if you have noticed any of the new projects along Erie in the last 3 years, so for example, the DeWitt Town Center project, as part of that project, they put a sidewalk in and new street trees along the road. That's something we made them do. The Dick's, where the new Dick's is, used to be Kmart Plaza. They put a sidewalk in along the front of that, some new street trees, benches, and a sidewalk connection that goes all the way back into the face of the building.
But nothing along Erie Boulevard?
Well, they did make improvements along Erie Boulevard as part of those projects. With the mixed use overlay that we're implementing in the town, there are some additional kind of design guidelines that will address some of the things that you're
Because if you're gonna
raising.
put this beautiful parkway in the center
Yes,
for biking and stuff and have the
Yeah.
sides look ugly,
yeah,
with people
Yeah.
not being forced to do something to
Right.
make it look attractive.
yes. We make people do things that look nice.
And maintain it.
We make them maintain it.
Too nice, you'll have too
Was,
many accidents.
was the core development?
But just one thing, so I look like a nice guy, but I'm not.
You're a nice guy. The core development, Best Buy and all of that, the entrance into that, was that something you imposed? Because they should be recognized for
Yeah.
doing a nice job.
So that's actually Benderson Development, Benderson Development.
Okay.
And you didn't hear this from me, but they own Macy's at Shopping Town.
That was in the paper.
Yeah, right. And they're also looking at purchasing Sears. And they're a great developer, and we hope
They'll buy the rest
that,
of the
yes,
town?
yes. But they did that on their own. That's a private,
Very nice.
that's a private driveway that goes back into Marshall's Plaza.
Yeah.
And they did that on their own. They're a great developer, a great property owner. They are gonna be building actually a new building in the interior of that
Yeah.
project. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with
For Alta?
Core Life, which is owned by the Hafners. So they're expanding rapidly, and one of their locations is gonna be in that new building, so. yeah.
Oh,
It's a restaurant, yep,
The
yep,
restaurant.
yep.
Oh, yeah.
Have them look at Fairmount Fair, Benderson is doing a dynamite
Yep.
job. They take better care of that mall than I do my front yard.
Yeah, that's,
They really do.
yeah, that's it.
Amazing.
Yeah, they're a great developer. So I'm happy to hang out for a few minutes if folks would like to ask any lingering questions, but